Vegapunk is dead. Well, right. I almost forgot to mention that spoilers ahead for up to the most recent chapter of the One Piece manga, that being chapter 1119. Anyways, Vegapunk is dead, and with his death means that we have been given a chance, an opportunity. Well, for me at least, because that signifies to me his near complete character. I think we have enough information to start. Let's start with the Alpha, the Omega, everything in between, Vegapunk, the man with the best brain in the world.
Hey, yo.
The very first time we hear about Vegapunk was in chapter 433, titled The Name of That Sea, where we meet Kobe after the events of Annie's Lobby. When it comes to technology, Dr. Vegapunk is number one. Discovered how devil fruits can confer their power and developed a technology where you can feed devil fruits to inanimate objects, foreshadowing us of the genius to come in later chapters. This is also interesting because it seems like he isn't shy about giving out his discoveries, as we see a couple of examples from both Marines and pirates using this newfound technology at the time, as we see in Spandam's sword, Mr. Four's gun, and later the Smiley fruit, the gas weapon, and one of the giants, Goldbird, Smiling's shield. Although for me the most memorable moment before his official reveal was in chapter 485, when Kuma was explaining his creator, stating, "I am called the Pacifista. I am the government's human weapon. I was created by the world's government resident genius, Dr. Vegapunk. He possesses the world's most brilliant mind. His scientific prowess is said to be 500 years ahead of mankind." From a young age, Vegapunk could have been called a genius even before the consumption of his devil fruit, although this is just me assuming, as we don't know exactly when he consumed it. He started and led an illegal research team called MADS, with him being the only one targeting peaceful products with science, while the other were either interested in creating weapons or benefiting from the research. Had many relationships with different people, such as Monkey D. Dragon, and was able to get his hands on the research done by the now dead O'Hara researchers. Later on, joined the world government itself for the extra funds, as well as to be mostly left alone from the world government, as he was forced by them to abandon or disband his research team, MAD. Here he continued his research for many years, where many events happen, which I will talk about in a later video. Of course, talking about Kuma. And at some point, surgically cut off the top of his head alongside his brain with the assistance of Stussy, a clone he had created when he led MADS and later on created Punk Records. And along with the creation of Punk Records came the creation of the Vegapunks, with Dr. Vegapunk as the Stella, which in kanji stands for the main body, and his 6 satellites, which embodies 6 different aspects of Vegapunk. So, let's talk about them in the order we meet them in the manga, starting with Punk 2 Lilith. We get to meet her in chapter 1061, titled Future Island Egghead. She embodies the aspect of evil. Upon first meeting her, she seems like an energetic individual with a focus on increasing her research budget, which seems to always be a problem for the Vegapunks, as even when working under the government, they still suffer from it. She also seems to have an impulsive and an annoyed personality, as she targets the Straw Hats, not thinking on the dangers she's put herself in, and was annoyed by Shaka, another member of the satellites, making sense of her situation. In later chapters, however, she seems to be a compassionate, character, as she cares about the rest of the satellites, shown when she wanted revenge against CP0 for Atlas and being worried for Edison when he was in danger. The second character we get to meet is Punk 1, Shaka. We get to meet him at the later chapter in chapter 1062, titled Adventures in the Land of Science. He embodies the aspect of good. We first hear from him when he warns Lilith of his miscalculation in the approach with Straw Hats and tells her to bring them to him. He seems to be a calm, reasonable, cautious, and observing character in compared to the other satellites. Upon officially meeting him, he starts to have a conversation with the Straw Hats on the island that they are in, talking about how this isn't an island of the future, but the past. He then tells the Straw Hats a bunch of information which they should have not known, much to the interest of Robin and to the disinterest of Usopp, telling them some information about the Void Century, the history and the aftermath of the O'Hara incident, as well as the research gained by the books that were saved in O'Hara by a certain survivor. He also seems to enjoy giving out orders to Lilith, much to her annoyance, and was later part of the search for the Stella, as he had disappeared during that time. When he finally found Stella, he did not have a good ending, as he was killed by his fellow satellite, York. The third satellite we meet is Atlas. Punk 5. We get to meet her in the same chapter as Shaka. She embodies the aspect of violence. She seems to be short-tempered and reckless, as when provoked, even by accident, she lets her emotions run high and results to violence, letting it take control over rational decision-making, as we see that in the example when she attacked Luffy, even though he's a conqueror, and even worse, when she's the first of the Vegapunks to go against CP0, even when she was clearly outnumbered and was immediately knocked out by Lucci. But let's rewind to when we first meet her. She meets the Straw Hats when they first enter Egghead and was confused for a hologram and being attacked by Luffy, to which she responded by fighting back. She later explains the automatic food machine and shows the power of light pressure gloves that allow her to interact with holograms. Which, side note, I thought those gloves were going to play a small role in dealing with Kizaru, but I guess not. She was then injured heavily by CP0 and later repaired and played a huge role in lowering the Frontier Dome and getting both Kuma and Stella to the giant ship. The next satellite that we get to meet is Edison, Punk 3. We meet him in chapter 1065 titled The Six Vegapunks. He embodies the aspect of thinking. We first hear from him when he instructed part of the Straw Hats, that being Sanji, Nami, Usopp, Robin, and Franklin, into a room with a Seraphim, doing so to collect data, though immediately getting distracted by his own brilliance, yelling, "Eureka!" as more ideas, possibly involving both the Seraphim and their bloodline element, and the evolution of their constant growth. He was also the first to take action to retake control of the Seraphim, almost getting killed if it wasn't for Sanji, though sustained injuries when he was attacked by S-Shark. Later on worked alongside Atlas and Stella to deactivate the Frontier Dome, and much later suffered more injury due to the same dome in order to save the remaining Vegapunks and Straw Hats by moving the clouds, seemingly sacrificing himself to not be part of the rescued Vegapunks, but also at some point disconnected himself from Punk Records, but not before having a heartfelt conversation with my babe, the first ever clone, Stussy. Anyways, he was truly an unspoken MVP during the events of Egghead. Now for Pythagoras, Punk 4. He was introduced in the same chapter as Edison. He embodies the aspect of wisdom. Seems to be one of the more peaceful and passive among the satellites, as he always tries to keep the peace between satellites and being protective of them in a peaceful manner. He seems to specialize on compiling and analyzing data, as seen when he was collecting data in the lineage factor for the Seraphim, though we didn't get much time with him, as the event in Egghead soon got him killed by a snake. We then meet York, Punk 6, the last of the satellites. We meet her in the same chapter as both Atlas and Pythagoras. She embodies the aspect of greed, the tallest among the satellites. When we first meet her, she seems to be the laziest and most gluttonous among the satellites, as she takes care of sleeping, eating, and even digesting for all of the satellites, so that they can focus on their duties and research without being interrupted. Seemingly to be an airhead, with her head in the clouds, but this was all some kind of facade, as she used the Seraphim to grant her time and later on killed one of her fellow satellites, Shaka, revealing that she was in constant contact with the world government and wanted to become a celestial dragon, helping the Gorosei as much as she could to locate the Denden Mushi that was telling the truth to the world, and then telling them about the locations of the last two remaining satellites that are still connected to Punk Records, signifying at this point that Edison either got disconnected or died before this part. Only Lilith and Atlas, and potentially Edison, have survived at this point due to her betrayal. And lastly, Dr. Vegapunk himself. We meet him in chapter 1066, titled The Will of O'Hara. He embodies the aspect of being the Stella, aka the main body. We already talked about his beginning, so let's talk about his actions during the events in Egghead. He is the pride and joy of the island, even among his satellites. He invented the satellites to further advance his research, each carrying certain traits within Vegapunk himself. Despite these 6 main traits of his, he is shown to be a very compassionate character with a strong sense of morality, as he chases and leans more towards peaceful ways to use his research, only swaying in his research due to the needing of always prioritizing the world government's research and the advancement towards both the Pacifista and the Seraphim Project. When we first meet him, he is Rayquazer's help, which, when I first read that, I thought that maybe the connection between his brain is still incomplete, making him stupid. But then again, this is the world's smartest man. He explained to us both his devil fruit and how he turned his brain into Punk Records, and tells us his dream of one day sharing his brain with the entire world, much to Chopper's joy and Jinbei's slight disapproval, as he brings up the question of ideology. But science will never advance if you spend all your time worrying about it. Now, let's not even mention misinformation. He then asks Luffy if he will take him off of Egghead, as his dealings with the Void Century and O'Hara research has landed him in trouble with the world government, not knowing that it was his own satellite, York, giving out his information, dooming his escape, as CP0, Navy officers, and even the Gorosei all come to Egghead, exhausting all of his choices, resources, and even his own friendships and creations in an attempt to escape, though it was all for naught, as he was injured time and time and time again, leading to his death. But with his death came a revelation. With his heart stopping, he activated the Denden Mushi, telling the world the truth. Though, if I'm being honest, I don't know why he needed a visual responder snail to give the information. Anyways, due to this delay in needing the world to prepare, he gave the world 10 minutes of him enjoying his time with both Shaka and Pythagoras and the makings of instant Vegapunk coffee, which they didn't even get to enjoy as it was done immediately. Anyways, at the same time of this happening, this forced Saint Saturn to summon all of the rest of the elders to stop the broadcast, summoning and arriving in their devil fruit forms, maybe in an attempt to disguise themselves a bit with all the marines running around, each with a task at hand, which I will not go over, just know that they're wreaking havoc in an attempt to find the transmitter. This is also where we get to see Punk records and where Vegapunk's brain is stored, causing even the likes of St. Marcus to pose a question. What is death exactly? Where do our ideas truly reside? I wonder why he asked that, as seemingly, at least to me, the elders seem a bit immortal. Anyways, Vegapunk first starts his message by telling us off rip that the world is sinking into the sea. And just in case there were any doubters that refused to believe him, with a time in the back stating the time of the recording, he predicts events that will eventually happen, as he tells the world of earthquakes that will render some islands uninhabitable, and how this earthquake was not a natural phenomenon, but in fact a man-made one, telling us about the void century and what he found in those texts, and how a war that started 900 years ago started with the first ever pirate, Joy Boy, versus the now present day world government. Also talks about the de-evolution or the development of weapons, as modern day weapons don't seem to hold up against weapons during the 100-year conflict. And due to this war, the world is now in a series of islands, while underneath lies continents and an old world submerged in water, slumbering unseen at the bottom of the sea. And that 100-year war with those ancient weapons is still going on to this date, 800 more years added to it, never coming to an end. And with the research of the past comes the research into the present, as he created the Mother Flame, a flame meant for energy source, turned the weapon as seen as what happened to Lulusia, confirming that an ancient weapon is still active and was used with his stolen resource, as well as telling the world about the three ancient weapons that are still out there, and that the ones who knew the truth were none other than the king of the pirates and his crew. Why did they keep the truth? One can only speculate. And with that said comes the final message, one that I would personally love to know, that those scattered around the world who bear the name of thee, within you there is a and that's about it. Those were all the events that happened in Egghead Island. And with that, this will either be updated more, as Dr. Vegapunk's body still seems to be wanted for some weird reason, as his body is now in the giant ship alongside Kuma's and one of the satellites, that being Atlas, and Lilith still being in the island with the other Straw Hats in their ship. Let's see where all of this goes. Hopefully they have a happy ending, although I feel that Atlas being reckless at the moment will get her killed, unfortunately, leaving only Lilith and Edison, hopefully, alive, and unfortunately, York will also end up being alive. But share below what you think about the video, as well as what do you think will happen after the events of Egghead. Thank you so much for watching. See you all in the next video.